She was called the ape woman, the bear woman, the ugliest woman in the world. She was exploited, humiliated, and dehumanized by those who saw her as a freak of nature. She was Julia Pastrana, a woman who suffered from two rare genetic conditions that made her look different from others. This is her story. Julia Pastrana was born in 1834 in Sinaloa, Mexico. She belonged to an indigenous tribe that lived in poverty and isolation. Her mother died when she was young, and her uncle sold her to a circus for a few pesos. She was then bought by a man named Francisco Sepulveda, who brought her to the United States. Sepulveda saw Julia as a potential gold mine. He advertised her as a human orangutan hybrid, a missing link between man and beast. He charged people to see her, touch her, and examine her. He also taught her to sing, dance, and speak English and Spanish, to showcase her intelligence and talent. In 1854, Julia made her stage debut in New York City. She was an instant sensation. Crowds flocked to see her, and newspapers wrote about her with curiosity and contempt. Some praised her grace and charm, while others mocked her appearance and origin. Julia was subjected to the same racism and bigotry that many people of color faced in the 19th century. She was compared to animals, dirt, and germs. She was seen as a curiosity, not a human being. She was also examined by doctors and scientists who measured her skull, took casts of her face, and speculated about her origins and reproduction. Despite the harsh treatment, Julia remained hopeful and resilient. She dreamed of finding love and happiness. She also had a strong faith in God and prayed for acceptance and forgiveness. In 1855, Julia met Theodore Lent, a showman who claimed to be a count from Russia. He offered to buy her from Sepulveda and promised to treat her well. Julia fell in love with him and agreed to marry him. She hoped that he would be her protector and companion. But Lent was not the man he pretended to be. He was a greedy and cruel man who only saw Julia as a source of income. He continued to exhibit her across Europe and North America, and even sold her body parts to museums and collectors. He also abused her physically and emotionally, and cheated on her with other women. In 1860, Julia became pregnant with Lent's child. She was overjoyed and hoped that her baby would be normal and healthy. She also hoped that her pregnancy would end her career as a performer and allow her to settle down with her husband. But Lent had other plans. He planned to use Julia and her baby as a new attraction and booked a tour in Moscow, Russia. Julia gave birth to a baby boy on March 20, 1860. He inherited her condition and was covered in hair like his mother. Julia was devastated but still loved her son. She named him Theodore after his father. She hoped that he would survive and grow up to be happy, but tragedy struck. The baby died after only 35 hours of life. Julia was heartbroken and blamed herself for his death. She also fell ill and developed a fever and pneumonia. She died 5 days later, on March 25, 1860. She was only 26 years old. But even in death, Julia did not find peace. Lent did not bury her and her son, but had them embalmed and preserved. He then sold their bodies to a museum in Moscow where they were displayed as mummies. He also married another woman who had hypertrichosis and exhibited her as Julia's sister. For over a century, Julia and her son's bodies were passed from one owner to another and exhibited in various countries. They were also stolen, vandalized, and damaged by fire and water. They were treated as objects, not as human beings. But in 2012, a miracle happened. A group of activists and artists, led by a Mexican woman named Laura Anderson Barbata, campaigned to repatriate Julia and her son's remains to Mexico. They argued that Julia deserved dignity and respect and that her body belonged to her homeland and culture. After years of negotiations and legal battles, Julia and her son's remains were finally returned to Mexico in 2013. They were welcomed by the Mexican government and the indigenous community of Sinaloa, who claimed Julia as one of their own. They were given a traditional funeral and burial, with music, flowers, and prayers. Julia Pastrana's life was a tragedy, but her legacy is a triumph. She was a woman who endured unimaginable suffering, but never lost her dignity and humanity. She was a woman who challenged the norms and prejudices of her time and inspired generations of artists and activists. She was a woman who finally found justice and peace after a long and painful journey. This is the story of Julia Pastrana, the ape woman, the bear woman, the ugliest woman in the world. But more than that, this is the story of Julia Pastrana, the woman, the human, the beautiful.